let's get into vendors. So there's two main reasons we track all your vendors on those documents that you're uploading. One is so that we can give you visibility on all the vendors you do business with. Two is because having the same vendor across documents helps us reconcile. So in WickedFile, if you head to the bookkeeper dashboard and go to manage all vendors, this is where you can see obviously all your vendors. It's broken up into two different areas. One are verified vendors. The other is unverified vendors. Verified vendors are made up of a collection from our database of vendors that we recognize, like WorldPack, Napa, Advanced Auto Parts. All those big vendors we know. So when you upload a WorldPack invoice and Advanced Auto invoice, we see that vendor and we know it's a verified vendor. You don't have to worry about it. We can confirm it's verified. Now, if you upload a WorldPack invoice and maybe there's whiteout over the last few letters on the logo, or maybe we just hallucinated extra letters, or it's from a vendor that is just not too common, like a local dealership or a vendor we're just not used to, those vendors will populate as an unverified vendor. Now, it's important to go through your unverified vendor list and go ahead and verify these. That way, the documents for these vendors can start reconciling. So again, I'm under manage all vendors. You can see all your unverified vendors, and we can go and start the process of verifying these. So I just threw these in a test account, but you'll notice Audi Dallas is showing up a few times, and this is exactly what I'm talking about earlier when I said, maybe the document's askew when we upload it, or there's drawing over the logo, or we just hallucinated different parts of the logo if it's just shaped weird. So all of these look to be the same Audi Dallas, just different ways it was extracted. Let's go through the first Audi Dallas and see how we verify this. So the first step I always like to do is, after clicking on the unverified vendor, is to view the most recent scan. Obviously, this will just pull up the most recent scan, probably an invoice or a credit, and it'll let you see the logo and see exactly which vendor this is. So, yep, it's Audi Dallas. And once I know that, I can go through the stepper. So the first thing it's going to ask me is, what vendor should Audi Dallas be mapped to? We'll always try to get you to map this unverified vendor to one of the existing verified vendors. So that way I can just go through this list of my verified vendors and see if Audi Dallas is already here. Always want to do this first. I do not see Audi Dallas. So let's get out of this. I'm going to hit create a new vendor and actually make Audi Dallas a verified vendor. So in this case, I can say, yep, Audi Dallas is the name, exactly how it is on the scan. Let's hit continue. It's going to ask me a few questions about Audi Dallas, like, is this a parts vendor? Always. Is this a cost of goods sold vendor? So in other words, like parts, sublet, tires, towing. They sell me parts. Yep. It's going to ask you to categorize this vendor to exactly the categories I just said. And it's going to be dependent on if it's cost of goods sold or not. So they sell me parts. And then the last question, is it a statement vendor? How often do you receive statements? So if you click yes, we'll ask you how much or how often they send you statements. If you click no, that's all we need to know. Now I can confirm the mapping. Now you'll notice before I hit submit, WickedFile is smart enough to see these other unverified vendors like Audi Dallas, Texas, and just Dallas, and know this is 99.9% most likely the same vendor that we're verifying. Let's go ahead and group these together and verify them together so you don't have to do every single individual one. So perfect, saving me time. Let's just hit submit. And now this will become a verified vendor. So let's head back to the bookkeeper dashboard. I can go to my manage all vendors, and you should see Audi Dallas will now be a verified vendor. Might take a few minutes for it to pop up. If I head over to all unverified vendors, you can see it's out of this list. And there's still a few more that weren't close enough for us to map together, so we just have to go in and verify these as well. It's going to be the same process. Now, Going through your unverified vendors this way is certainly one way to do it. The way I prefer is if you head back to this main dashboard and you actually scroll to the very bottom of the bookkeeper dashboard, we have this unverified vendors tab again. And you're probably thinking, hey, why do we show it twice? Why is it under manage all vendors at the top and why is it down here? Well, we give you two different ways to do it. This list at the bottom of the bookkeeper dashboard of unverified vendors is actually going to be shorter than if you go through managing all your vendors, because this unverified vendors list will only track unverified vendors found in your current month. So in other words, I'm in September. I'm only looking at September insights right now. So this will only show unverified vendors if the documents for those vendors have been uploaded in September, because it shouldn't matter otherwise. Now, if I go back to August and one of those Audi Dallas unverified vendors uploaded an invoice last month, then I would be prompted to fix this under unverified vendors. So I typically recommend fixing your unverified vendors through the bookkeeper dashboard at the bottom. But again, if you just want to get all of them handled and you plan on looking at insights from previous months, you can certainly go to manage all your vendors and verify your vendors this way. Now, the last thing I will say is if the vendor is already verified, everything's good, just like these hundreds of vendors that we have already done, that WickedFile's already recognized, you can actually see a unique screen for verified vendors. Because obviously you don't need to verify them. It'll show you a completely different screen. So what I mean by that is if I click on Ames Collision Center, for example, it's going to take me right to the classic verified vendor page where any vendor you click on that's verified will pull up any transactions, invoices, credits, invoices with tax, shipping, or fees, or any invoices/credits that need review, all from this vendor, all from this month. In this case, I don't do a lot of business with this collision center, so there's nothing in here, but it's always here for you to know if you ever want to open up the vendor page. You can also edit the configuration like we kind of just did with the unverified vendors. If you ever want to change something like the vendor name, if they actually maybe don't give you parts, if they're not cost of goods sold, or most importantly, if they are or are not a statement vendor. Now, the last thing I will say is with any of these verified vendors, as you're mapping them, creating them, there is a small chance you could mess up. Like maybe I accidentally map Audi Dallas to Ames Collision Center. We give you the option to reset the vendor. And what that means is both Ames Collision Center and Audi Dallas, if I mapped it to Ames Collision, would now both be thrown individually in the unverified vendor list for you to basically try again and start over. You can always see the rules that you've mapped under Manage Mapping Rules. If you ever mapped another vendor to this vendor, it'll always show up under Scan Rules. And you can also create transaction rules if you ever want to configure how you match to transactions. Like maybe if the vendor name comes up differently through Plaid.